May I speak in the name of our loving, liberating, and life-giving God. Amen. You may be seated. A few nights ago, I sat down with my son to watch the San Jose Quakes, our local professional soccer team, take on the fearsome St. Louis City FC. Soren had been laid low for a few days by flu B, quite incapable of doing much else than sleeping, watching TV, and sucking on cherry Ludens, which we Rannas happily pretend are medicine. But he displayed a first glimmer of returning health in the form of excitement about this game. The Quakes, whom he follows with the kind of fervor my brother used to track the Cleveland Browns when we were kids, were predicted to lose. Indeed, as I placed an overflowing bowl of popcorn between us, hoping it might elicit the return of his appetite, Soren told me that our win probability was a mere 30%. But the underdogs took an early lead with a wild goal and then found themselves in the unenviable position of having offended their aggressive opponents, spending much of the rest of the first half in the kind of flat-out, dogged defending that makes you tired just watching it. Our goalie had 4 truly spectacular saves in a row, which only seemed to make the St. Louis attack even more ruthless. At some point, breathlessly impressed by our back line, and truly shocked that we had not yet given up a goal, I said to Soren, "Wow, they are really trying not to lose." And he laughed at me as he said, "No, Mom, they're trying to win." For some reason, this exchange stayed with me as I watched the rest of the game, and has stayed with me since. I'm sure I phrased my compliment the way I did because of the unpromising odds facing the Quakes. But it occurred to me later that trying diligently not to lose and trying hard to win can both be paths to victory, though they seem, and in certain ways are, rather different. But then again, that's true of lots of aspects of the beautiful game. A zone defense and marking man-to-man are different strategies, but both can lead to victory. Neither a 4-4-2 formation or a 4-4-3, referring to the number of attackers, midfielders, and defenders a team puts out on the field, is actually better than the other, and both can be the way to a win. There are usually many ways to accomplish what we set out to accomplish, on the field and off. In the book Cultivating Communities of Practice, educational theorist Etienne Wenger tells the brief tale of 2 stonecutters commissioned by an ancient king. They toiled side by side for days, weeks, months in the grueling, repetitive work of cutting stone blocks. Eventually, someone came along and asked the first what he was doing, and he said, "I am cutting this stone in a perfectly square shape." He turned to his neighbor and asked the same question. This stonecutter smiled as she replied, "I am building a cathedral." Same work, such different ways of going about it. I had all this in mind as I prayed with today's gospel, especially that most memorable line, "I am the way and the truth and the life." It occurs to me that part of why it can be hard to know what to make of this passage is because the word way has so many different meanings for us. Is the way to victory trying not to lose or trying to win? Or is victory itself the way a game concludes? Is the way to construct a cathedral by cutting stone or dreaming a dream? Or is the fundamental act of creating a sacred structure itself a way, however accomplished? Aren't singing a hymn, speaking a prayer, kneeling in confession, doing an act of service all ways to draw near to God? If you're heading to the now contentiously named body of water between Mexico and Florida, are not the Mississippi River and the Rio Grande both ways to get there? Is the way the journey, the means, the current, the drive? Is Jesus the way in the sense that all the waterways are ways, or is he the place where all the paths converge, or is he the water itself? What does it mean for Jesus to say he is the way, the truth, the life? Well, it is hard for those of us who call ourselves his disciples to think of a more comforting, more beautiful description. For many others, this passage elicits unease, because it's also been used in countless times and places as a kind of litmus test for salvation, invoked to exclude, denounce, and demean, especially when coupled with the sentence that follows, "No one comes to the Father except through me." This is never truer than when the whole phrase is written in 3-foot-long block letters and emblazoned on billboards lining freeways across the country, which I sadly have to say sadly, it frequently is. I say sadly because Jesus saying, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me," is, I really believe, one of the most radically all-encompassing, universalizing, cosmically consequential things he says in all of the Gospels, a fact readily apparent when we consider these words in the context of the whole passage, rather than just plucking out a line or two. Today's reading comes from a section of John's Gospel known as the Farewell Discourse. It contains Jesus' final teachings for his disciples before his arrest, crucifixion, and resurrection. He explains to his friends what is going to happen to him, tells them that when he departs, the Spirit will come among them as an advocate and guide, and prepares them to continue on his own ministry in the world. A theme, arguably the theme of this discourse, is love. Jesus washes his friends' feet in the upper room and gives them a new commandment to love one another as he has loved them. Jesus encourages them to practice caring for one another, to cultivate a mutually supportive community. He emphasizes again and again that now that they have come to know him, they have come to know God. Remember that in ancient Judaism, no one ever actually got to see God directly. Moses once caught a glimpse of God's backside in a swirling mountaintop sandstorm, but other than that, God was unseen and unseeable. Jesus explains to his disciples today that in him, God has chosen to reveal God's self. God has chosen to be less mystery and more friend. "If you know me, you will know my Father also," he says. And because of this radical act of divine vulnerability, we now have access to a different kind of relationship with God, and through God, with one another. "Once you were not a people," Peter explains in his epistle for today, "but now, because of the gift of Jesus' life, you are God's people. Something has changed forever." Jesus tells his friends, and though there are difficult times ahead, the end of his life, the beginning of a new life for each of them, he urges them not to give in to despair. "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me." In other words, come what may, trust God and trust me. This alone will see us through, will sustain us in seasons of sorrow and uncertainty, will see us home. Moral theologian, the Reverend Dr. Sam Wells, writes that while Jesus is the name of the Son of God, it is also simply the word we Christians use to describe God's longing to be with us, God's irrepressible and eternal desire to know and share life with us. Because of this, and only because of this, we too can receive these encouraging words of Jesus as a great blessing. "Do not let your hearts be troubled." Though the world remains a near constant source of grief and terror, though illness and age continue to afflict those we love, though our pace of life may feel degrading and relentless, Though our own paths may not always be clear, we are chosen. We are beloved. We are known. We are not alone. And this, frankly, is everything. This was not cheap comfort. Remember that Jesus was speaking to his closest friends, asking them to carry on his own ministry, and that all but one of them will die a death as unjust and gruesome as his own. And yet Jesus tells them, do not allow your heart to be tossed or agitated, upset or disturbed. Don't let this world rattle you, depending on the translation. It is within the container of the farewell discourse that Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Before we can understand what he meant, we need to be clear about what he did not say. Jesus did not say, this style of worship is the way. This creed is the way. This sinner's prayer is the way. This identity is the way. This set of beliefs and practices is the way. This denomination is the way. This order of ministry is the way. This style of life is the way. Jesus did not even say, the church is the way. Jesus did not come into the world to create an institution among other institutions. God is not a founder. God is a creator, less interested in consumers and followers than sparking joy, transformation, and connection. So instead of saying so many other possible things, what he says is that he is the way, truth, and life. That no matter what, no matter who you are or how you pray or what you think, if you are moving toward God, you are walking with him, and he is walking with you. It is our relationship with Jesus that matters, because it is our relationship with Jesus that changes us. Indeed, that changes everything. To hear today's gospel and take it to mean that some people are in, those who believe in Jesus, and some people are out, those who do not, is actually to cheapen the graciousness of these words, to reduce our relationship with God to some cursory exchange, like the secret codes middle schoolers peddle in to police the boundaries of their cliques. But God is not a middle schooler anxious about the opinion of their peers. God is not interested in keeping anyone out, but only in ushering everyone in, extending the most gratuitous, extravagant invitation to all, again and again. God never pushes away, shames, reviles. God is more like the sweet kid in the back row, constantly passing notes that say, will you be my friend, than the mean girls and jocks we see in the movies. Jesus is not concerned with condemning people who aren't religious or who don't know what they believe. I mean, it seems pretty clear that Thomas does not know what he believes, that Peter is terminally all over the place, that Philip struggles to track the conversation. And these guys actually knew Jesus in the flesh. They got to hear the words fall from his own lips, share food at his table. And still, Jesus clearly adores them and wants nothing more than to share in their company and for them to enjoy his. Jesus is not offended by their doubt or inconsistency or their struggle. What if instead of worrying about who is in and who is out, we heard this passage as loving reassurance, generous welcome? Life is marred by suffering and grief and injustice. Yes, there will be trials ahead, but Jesus assures us he is with us. Do not let your hearts be troubled. There's plenty of room in my Father's house, and don't worry, if you ever get lost, I will come and make sure you find the way. No matter the words you use, the job you work, the language you speak, the books you read, the time you live in, the way you pray, if you are drawing near to God, you will be with me, and I will be with you. For sharing life with God, the ultimate truth, the ground of all being, is being in relationship with Jesus, and vice versa. I recently read that in a remote part of Ireland called Connemara, when two strangers meet, they don't ask one another's name. Instead, in their native language, they ask, "To whom do you belong?" Because of Jesus' life, because of the community he created and that has been stewarded throughout the ages, we know the truth of who we are deep in our bones. We belong to God, and through God to one another. Once we were not a people, but now we are God's people, and there is nothing we can do to change that. So do not let your hearts be troubled, for love has come to dwell among us, and there is room enough for all in God's home. Amen.